You set the goal. You feel that surge of motivation. You tell yourself, this time, it's different, but then, days turn into weeks, and the fire you felt fizzles into that familiar whisper of tomorrow. You know this cycle, don't you? The half-read books on your nightstand. The gym membership that's basically a recurring donation. The ambitious project, once a source of electrifying purpose, now just gathering digital dust. It's the quiet, grinding failure that hurts the most, the slow erosion of trust in yourself. What if you could break this cycle forever? What if the secret to unbreakable discipline wasn't about trying harder, but about applying 1,000-year-old principles perfected by Zen monks to make failure almost impossible? A philosophy so effective it doesn't rely on willpower, motivation, or even your mood. It's designed to systematically silence the part of you that chooses to quit. This is the story of how a man named Raphael, a programmer trapped in this exact cycle, stumbled upon these ancient ideas, blended them with modern science, and forged a level of discipline that others around him found, well, frightening. And it all started when he realized his entire approach to discipline was fundamentally broken. Raphael was a cartographer of unfinished worlds. His computer was a graveyard of brilliant ideas, a half-coded app that could revolutionize note-taking, a meticulously planned novel with only 3 chapters written, a language learning program he'd used for exactly 5 days straight. Each project was a monument to a past version of himself, a ghost of motivation past. He was smart, he was capable, but he was painfully inconsistent. His life was a series of powerful starts and weak finishes. He'd read all the books. He knew about habit loops, dopamine detoxes, and setting smart goals. He tried waking up at 5 a.m., and for one glorious week, it worked. He felt like a titan, sipping coffee while the world slept. But then came a cold Tuesday morning where the warmth of his bed felt infinitely more compelling than the promise of productivity. He hit snooze. And just like that, the titan crumbled. The real failure wasn't hitting snooze once, it was the story he told himself afterward, see? I'm just not a disciplined person. That story became his identity. His mind, he realized, was a constant negotiation. The alarm would ring, and the debate would begin. Just 10 more minutes, you were up late. One day off won't hurt. The part of him that wanted comfort was a master negotiator, and the part that wanted greatness was a tired lawyer with a losing record. He was exhausted by the internal battle. Willpower, he concluded, was a finite resource, and his was bankrupt. This cycle of defeat led him down a research rabbit hole, far beyond typical self-help blogs. He started looking into the lives of people who displayed an almost inhuman consistency: astronauts, elite soldiers, and, most intriguingly, Zen monks. How did they maintain such rigorous schedules for decades without an apparent struggle? He wasn't just interested in their habits, he was interested in the operating system running those habits. He discovered that Zen monasteries aren't built on the idea of heroic willpower, their very structure does the heavy lifting, making willpower less of a factor. The bell rings, you get up. The meal is served, you eat. The meditation period begins, you sit. There's no debate. The decision has already been made. And in this ancient structure, he found his first clue: the secret to unbreakable discipline isn't about winning the internal debate. It's about eliminating the debate altogether. He began to synthesize what he learned, combining principles from ancient Zen philosophy with modern neuroscience, and he started calling his new system irreversible commitments. These weren't just habits, they were practices designed not to strengthen his willpower, but to systematically dissolve the ego, the self that kept trying to talk him out of his own goals. He was about to stop trying to be a disciplined person and instead create a system where discipline was the only possible outcome. The first commitment Raphael made was the simplest and, in a way, the most profound. He called it the vow of first light. This wasn't about the moral superiority of waking up early, it was about changing his relationship with the act of waking up itself. The monks he studied didn't wake up at 4 a.m. because they were motivated. They woke up because a bell rang, and that bell was a non-negotiable reality. The sound was a trigger, and their rising was the automatic response. The decision was external. Raphael didn't have a monastery bell, but he could create a modern one. He had to sever the link between his feelings and his actions. His alarm was the signal, but between that signal and his feet hitting the floor, there was a space. In that space lived the negotiator, the voice of comfort and compromise. His first task, close that space for good. He learned that our prefrontal cortex, the seat of conscious decision-making, is what lights up when you debate hitting the snooze button. It burns a massive amount of mental energy. The Zen monks, by outsourcing their schedule to the environment, preserved that energy for higher awareness. So, Raphael made an irreversible commitment. He bought an old-school, screeching alarm clock and put it across his bedroom, right next to a lamp on a smart timer. The rule was simple and absolute: when the alarm sounds, the light turns on, and you stand up. You don't think. You don't feel. You don't assess your level of tiredness. You just execute the command. Standing up was the only thing that mattered. The first morning was brutal. The alarm blared, and his body screamed for more sleep. The negotiator started its pitch: "This is ridiculous. You're not a monk." But he had made a vow. He focused on a single, mechanical instruction: alarm. Light. Stand. He swung his legs out of bed and stood up before his brain could even mount a defense. He was groggy and angry. But he was standing. He did it the next day, and the next. He realized the first 5 seconds were the entire battle. Win those 5 seconds, and you win the day. Neurologically, he was carving a new pathway. Each time he stood up without hesitation, he weakened the old loop of negotiation and reinforced a new one: cue, alarm, leads to routine, stand. He was shifting the action from his thinking brain to his automatic brain, the basal ganglia. After a few weeks, something strange happened. The internal debate got quieter. The negotiator was losing its power. Standing up became less of a struggle and more of a reflex. He hadn't become more motivated or disciplined in the traditional sense. He had just practiced the motion of standing up so many times that it became the default path. This is the essence of the first commitment: make your primary goal so simple and binary that it bypasses decision-making. It's not wake up and be productive. It's just stand up. You're not a person who wakes up early. You're a person who stands up when the alarm rings. This small, irreversible act sends a powerful signal to your identity: I am someone who does what they say they'll do, regardless of how I feel. Once Raphael conquered the morning, he faced his next great enemy: the illusion of multitasking. As a programmer, his work life was a symphony of distractions. Emails pinged, notifications flashed, and his own mind would constantly splinter his focus. He'd be deep in code, and a thought would pop up: I should check if that client replied. He'd switch tabs, answer the email, and by the time he returned, the delicate thread of concentration was gone. He was busy all day but rarely productive. He discovered the Zen concept of mushin, or no mind. It doesn't mean an empty mind, but a mind free from the clutter of conflicting thoughts, a state of total presence. A swordsman in a state of mushin doesn't think, he's swinging high, so I should block low. He just moves. The thinking mind is removed from the equation. Raphael realized modern work is the total opposite of motion. We're rewarded for juggling, for being responsive, for keeping a dozen tabs open in our brains. He saw his lack of discipline wasn't a moral failing, it was a consequence of a perpetually divided mind. His second irreversible commitment became the law of the single point. For a set period each day, at first, just 60 minutes, he'd commit to a single task, and only that task. To make it irreversible, he changed his environment. He used an app to block all distracting websites. He put his phone in a timed lockbox in another room. He closed every single tab except the one he needed. He created a digital monastery. The rule was absolute: for this hour, you do not switch tasks. If a random idea pops into your head, you let it pass like a cloud. If you feel the urge to check email, you observe the urge, and you don't obey it. You're not here to answer emails. You're here to write code. Your world shrinks to this single point. The first few sessions were torture. His brain, addicted to the novelty of distraction, rebelled. He felt a phantom itch to open a new tab, a physical restlessness. But the rules of his monastery were strict. There was nowhere to run. His only option was to sit with the discomfort and return his attention, again and again, to the single task. This practice is like a form of zazen, sitting meditation, applied to work. In zazen, you focus on the breath. When your mind wanders, you don't scold it, you just guide it back. Raphael did the same with his code. Mind wanders to his inbox. Gently guide it back to the screen. Slowly, the urge to switch task began to fade. He found he could enter a state of deep focus he hadn't experienced since he was a kid, the flow state modern psychology talks about, which is nearly identical to the Zen state of Mushin. An hour would pass in what felt like 15 minutes, and he'd accomplish more than he used to in an entire afternoon. He was rewiring his brain for monofocus. By starving his mind of new stimuli, he was forcing it to find satisfaction in depth. This is the second commitment: you build discipline not by managing distractions, but by creating an environment where they can't exist. You commit to a single point of focus, and you access a level of performance a divided mind can never know. Raphael was building momentum. He was waking up without a fight and working with singular focus. But he knew that discipline is fragile if it only works when life is perfect. What happens when you get sick? Or have to travel? Or a family emergency shatters your routine? This is where most self-improvement systems fall apart. His research led him to the concept of Fudoshin, which translates to a movable mind or unshakable heart. It's a state of mental equanimity that remains stable even when the world is chaotic. The warrior with Fudoshin is like a boulder in a river. The water, life's chaos, flows around him, but he remains unmoved. He doesn't see obstacles as reasons to quit, he sees them as conditions to adapt to. Raphael realized his discipline was brittle. A single disruption could derail him for weeks. He needed a system that anticipated failure and adapted to it. This led to his third irreversible commitment, the principle of the immovable mind. This wasn't one action but a preemptive strategy. He sat down and listed everything that could break his discipline: illness, travel, exhaustion, urgent deadlines. For each obstacle, he created a pre-solution, a simplified, non-negotiable protocol. The rule was, when X happens, I will do Y. For example, when I am sick, I won't do my full routine, but I will sit on the edge of my bed for 5 minutes of quiet breathing at my usual wake-up time. When I travel, I won't bring my coding gear, but I will spend 20 minutes each morning journaling about the project's architecture with a pen and paper. When I am completely exhausted, I won't do my focused hour, but I will open the file and read the last line of code I wrote before closing it. This approach is powerful for two reasons. First, it eliminates decision-making when you're at your weakest. When you're sick or tired, your ability to make good choices is at an all-time low. By pre-deciding your actions, you don't give the negotiator a chance to speak. The decision was already made by the strongest version of you. Second, it protects your identity. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you are. When you skip a day, you cast a vote for "I'm someone who quits." But even if your pre-solution is tiny, like just opening a file, you are still casting a vote for "I'm a programmer. I show up. No matter what." You maintain the chain of identity. The first time he got sick, the old Raphael would have stayed in bed and lost all his progress. The new Raphael consulted his protocol. He dragged himself out of bed and just sat there, breathing. It felt ridiculous. But he wasn't doing it for his health, he was doing it for his identity. He was telling his subconscious, "Even now, we show up." When he recovered, there was no barrier to getting back into his routine. He hadn't broken the chain. His discipline had bent, but it hadn't shattered. This is the immovable mind in practice. It's not about being a robot. It's about being a strategist who plans for deviation. If Raphael's struggle is hitting home for you, and you want to go deeper into these principles, make sure you subscribe to the channel. We explore how to blend ancient wisdom with modern science every week to build a more disciplined life. Raphael had built a robust system. He was conquering his mornings, his focus, and even his off days. But one final, terrifying piece was missing. All of his commitments, as strong as they were private. He was accountable only to himself. And he knew that the secret self, the person you are when no one is watching, is a master of self-deception. In Zen monasteries, commitment is public and physical. When you take vows, you shave your head. You wear robes. You live in a community where your actions are seen. Quitting isn't a quiet decision, it involves a public retreat from the identity you've adopted. This creates what psychologists call a high cost of exit. The social pain of quitting becomes greater than the physical pain of continuing. This taps into powerful psychological forces. When you make a public commitment, you're recruiting your own brain's desire for social consistency to keep you on track. Raphael knew he had to kill his secret self. He had to make a commitment so public that failure would carry an unbearable cost. This was his fourth and final irreversible commitment, the death of the secret self. He chose his biggest goal, to finish his note-taking app and launch it in 6 months. In the past, he would have kept this a secret, protecting it from judgment. This time, he did the opposite. First, he made a financial commitment. He calculated a minimum budget for server costs and design assets. Then he prepaid for them. He bought the domain, a year of hosting, and hired a designer for a small, upfront project. He had invested real money he'd lose if he didn't follow through. Second, he made a public commitment. He wrote a detailed blog post outlining his vision for the app, its features, and, most importantly, a public launch date. He posted it on his professional blog, shared it on LinkedIn, and sent it to tech newsletters. He didn't write, "I hope to launch," he wrote, "On November 15, 2025, I will be launching this app." A declaration. A promise. The moment he hit publish, a wave of terror washed over him. He was exposed. There was no hiding now. The secret self, the one who could quietly abandon projects without consequence, was dead. He had burned the ships. Retreat was no longer an option. This is the ultimate expression of an irreversible commitment. It's the understanding that discipline isn't just an internal game, it's a game played in the real world. By making your goals public, you recruit the world as your accountability partner. The next 6 months were the most productive of his life. There were days he felt lazy or discouraged. But the public promise was a constant, gravitational pull. The thought of having to write a blog post explaining his failure was a more powerful motivator than any burst of inspiration. He was no longer just coding for himself, he was coding to keep his word. On November 15, Raphael launched his app. It wasn't perfect, but it was finished. It was real. The launch was a success, but the true victory wasn't the app, it was the man he had become. His friends watched his transformation with a mix of awe and confusion. They saw a man who operated without the normal friction of procrastination. A person whose actions were as reliable as a clock. His discipline had become, as he once worried, frightening. It was frightening because it looked effortless. He didn't seem to be trying anymore. And that was the secret he'd learned from those 1,000-year-old Zen principles. True, unbreakable discipline isn't about the constant, draining application of willpower. It's about being a brilliant architect, an architect of systems, environments, and commitments so well designed that success becomes the path of least resistance. It's about systematically dismantling the negotiating self until all that's left is action. 1. You start with the vow of first light, making your first action of the day automatic and non-negotiable. 2. You embrace the law of the single point, creating a sanctuary of focus to tap into the state of mushin, or no mind. 3. You adopt the principle of the immovable mind, preparing for obstacles to forge an anti-fragile discipline inspired by Fudotion. 4. And finally, you kill the secret self with a public vow, raising the stakes until the cost of quitting is too high to bear. This is the path. It isn't easy, but it is simple. It is the process of moving from doing to being. You stop trying to be disciplined and start becoming the person for whom discipline is as natural as breathing. The struggle ceases, not because you've become stronger, but because you've become wiser. You have removed the self that would choose to quit, and what remains is a force that simply continues. If you are ready to stop negotiating with yourself and start building, make your own first commitment. It doesn't have to be big. Choose one irreversible act. And in the comments below, declare it. Write vow made. Not for me, but for you. To kill the secret self, and begin.